This video openly discusses the ending to Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm going to be speaking about the story with zero restrictions, and there will be heavy spoilers throughout. I was having the time of my life during my first playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Remake. You only need to check my other video where I gush about the game for 30 minutes to see just how much I love it. That being said, during that first initial playthrough, two things continued to occur that kept aggravating me a little bit. It wasn't ruining the game for me, not by a long shot, but at first, it was a little jarring at the best of times, and I was questioning Square Enix's choices whenever these two things continued to occur. The first thing was the inclusion of the Watchers of Fate. These beings were gatekeepers of destiny, and should anything try to change or alter that destiny, then the Watchers would get involved to try and steer the events back on course. They didn't pick a side, they just wanted to preserve this flow of fate. Fair enough, seems harmless. If they're not here to mess up the storyline and keep it on track, then I suppose that's a good thing, innit? But I found myself getting annoyed at their inclusion. I just wanted to have a cutscene where they didn't suddenly appear to correct something. Half the time I felt like they were getting in the way and I just wanted them to piss off already. The second thing, and I consider this to be the more annoying of the two issues, was the inclusion of Sephiroth so early on in the game. In the original Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth is only mentioned by some characters, and we don't actually see him visually until much later on after the party have left the city of Midgar. The original game kept a steady flow of dread and suspense lingering, which built up this mental image of who Sephiroth was, so when the character finally is revealed, it comes with an added wave of awe and apprehension. He really was as legendary and as frightening as characters claimed him to be. It's honestly some incredibly well-paced storytelling and I love it. But the remake decides to, right off the bat, throw Sephiroth in our faces. There was no build-up. No major suspense was formed. Sephiroth just appears in front of Cloud in the middle of a street to torment him. And when this first happened, I kind of felt lukewarm to it. I mean, sure, Sephiroth looked cool as all hell and his dialogue was wicked, and in all honesty, I was impressed by his presentation, but I don't know, it just felt too soon. And if that wasn't bad enough, from there on out, for the rest of the game, Sephiroth would pop up somewhat continuously to torment Cloud. After a while, it became a little annoying. Cloud couldn't go 5 yards in front of him without old Sephi boy turning up to give him a headache, and I kept wondering why Square chose to do this. Like, why the bloody hell would Square misuse such a prolific character? It felt like they were wasting him. At the time, during my first initial run, I just didn't understand their approach. I appreciated seeing Sephiroth, but it felt like all the suspense and build-up was missing, and in truth, it left me feeling kinda disappointed. I was worried that these two issues were going to leave a bad taste in my mouth, and as I approached the endgame, I had fear and dread looming over me for that reason. Then, I completed the game, and saw the ending. And once the coin dropped on what Square were doing here, I applauded. Man literally clapped his hands in approval. Now, it's fair to say a number of you won't agree with what I'm about to say here, and of course, that's cool. Your opinions are yours, just like mine are mine, and that's how we get down on the big bad internet. But for my sake, yeah, stick with me and just hear me out. Nah, you don't have to agree, but I really want to explain why I feel the way I do about the ending. I'm not here to change your minds, I'm just here to express mine. So, context then, in case some of you are unsure of what the ending meant, or why there's been a bit of an outcry by some fans. Firstly, what is a remake? A remake is another, newer version of an already established piece of fictional media. Remakes follow more or less the same storyline, though changes can be expected in some capacity to reflect modern day standards. Some good examples I can think of are remakes of the first two Resident Evil games. Both games tread through the same events, but also add additional aspects to the narrative without drastically shaking the core foundations of what was established in their original versions. In the end though, the point of a remake's existence is to provide another version of something we already have, and the two versions of the same media exist as separate entities. Now, Final Fantasy VII Remake does this to a degree. It travels through the same events that occurred in the original Final Fantasy VII, so calling it a remake is somewhat true. However, the perspective on why we're treading through the same story again is what differentiates this title from other remakes, and it's honestly one of the reasons why I applauded the ending once I understood it. Final Fantasy VII Remake seems to be acting as a sequel to the original game, one that is travelling through the same events again, but from a perspective that has been set after the events of the original game's storyline has concluded. Sephiroth in the remake is either from or is aware of the future. He knows of the events that transpired in the original FF7, and he knows ultimately he is defeated by Cloud. Sephiroth doesn't succeed in achieving his goals, and his purpose here in the remake is to change that outcome for himself. Now, up until the very end of the game, I didn't realise this. In fact, the game doesn't specifically spell it out for you either, it wants you to think about it. Square want you to think about the game you just played and analysed what happened. After my first playthrough, I was so shocked by this revelation that I immediately went back through the remake again, and all of a sudden, the pieces started falling into place. Plot points that hint at this direction were staring at me straight in the face, and I hadn't noticed them until my perspective on the game had been changed by the ending. Seeing everything again for a second time now brought a level of clarity that felt incredible, and I loved it. I absolutely loved how I was seeing the exact same game again from an enlightened point of view. It felt like a completely different game, a brand new experience on top of something that was already a brand new experience. The moments where Sephiroth appeared out of place now made perfect logical sense from this narrative's direction, and I no longer hated it. I welcomed it. I enjoyed it. I foolishly thought the game was being incompetent and reckless by shoving Sephiroth into every other scene, when in reality, it was telling a bigger story, a new story that builds upon what the original game had built, and it wanted me to figure that out for myself. And I appreciated this. I was so focused on this remake as being a beat-for-beat remake, it never occurred to me that this wasn't just a different, newer version of a game I dearly loved, it was a continuation of that game, an expansion of what Final Fantasy VII was, and it was doing all of it by treading through the same story that began this journey in the first place. I was playing a game that continued the storyline by running that story back through the story it had already told in an attempt to change the final overall outcome of the entire story. Boy! Then there's the Watchers of Fate. These beings direct the flow of events so that it continues along the same path that the original FF7 story flowed on. Now, here's the thing. Remember who the Watchers are. They are entities of the planet. Their role is to preserve the events that keep the planet alive. Nowhere in their job description does it imply that they have the well-being of humanity on their list of objectives too. The Watchers work for the planet's preservation, not the people living on it. Let's take it back to the ending of the original FF7, and via extension the Advent Children movie as well. And hell, even Dirge of Cerberus, let's throw that in there too, fuck it. What happened to the humans in those sources of media? Well, the ending of FF7 showed us that a lot of humans died during the events of Meteorfall, and those who did survive were then at threat of succumbing to geostigma, which was a disease that was brought about due to the defeat of Sephiroth. Throughout all of these stories, humans pulled through but not after suffering heavy losses and then getting set up for another catastrophe right after. The humans never caught a break. But, throughout all of these events, the planet itself comes through just fine. And the Watchers are here to preserve that storyline because, although the humans suffer in that story, the planet doesn't. So the planet wants that storyline preserved. Sephiroth, being the anomaly that he is choosing to defy fate because in the original story, he is defeated and fails at achieving his goals. Cloud and our heroes are initially on a balance with fate, but once they start to understand that their future is rife with suffering, they too decide to defy destiny as well. In an interesting direction of storytelling for Final Fantasy VII Remake, both our protagonists and antagonist want to oppose the same thing, although clearly for different reasons and final outcomes. The humans want to survive, so by the end of FF7 Remake, our heroes battle fate and essentially kill it, removing fate and destiny from the equation. Now, I like this. This matters to me personally. And why does it matter to me personally? Well, I mentioned in the video I did regarding my personal history with FF7 that upon completing the original FF7 for the first time, I felt kinda detached. It felt like I had lost some very dear friends, and I had never felt that from a video game before. It was such a raw and unique feeling. I mentioned how video games tend to give you a reward for completing them, though the ending of the original Final Fantasy VII didn't feel like a reward at all. It felt too sad to be anything to celebrate about. It just never occurred to me until playing this remake that perhaps, maybe, just maybe, that the ending to the original Final Fantasy VII wasn't meant to be seen as a good ending after all. That perhaps in actuality, the ending we got back then was the bad ending. With the way that sinks in, and the way in which FF7 Remake played out, it feels like Square Enix are offering a chance to experience the same storyline again with a happier ending that might be achievable. No other moment in the game highlights this possibility more than Zack Fair's appearance. Zack, a beloved character who in the original storyline dies protecting Cloud's Strife, thereby passing the Buster Sword onto him, which eventually leads Cloud down the path of a hero. Zack's sacrifice set into motion Cloud's own journey through the original FF7. In layman's terms, if there had been no Zack Fair, there would be no Cloud Strife ex-soldier first class carrying a Buster Sword that arrives in Midgar and teams up with Avalanche. In the remake, during the ending, we see Zack Fair's final moments play out again. It's a shot-for-shot recreation of his last stand against his pursuers that he faced at the end of his solo game Crisis Core. Except here in the remake, once Cloud and his party defeat Fate, it causes a ripple effect throughout time, and Zack's own fate is seen to suddenly change. Instead of dying to the onslaught of machine gun fire, Zack Fair triumphs. Now, what's interesting about this event unfolding is that it's happening in an alternative universe. In this new timeline, Zack Fair didn't die on those cliff tops. He survived and carried Cloud to Midgar. When I saw this during the ending, it absolutely obliterated my mind. I love Zack Fair, I truly do. He is one of my favourite characters of all time. His energy, his ambition, his sacrifice, he is inspiring. He's what I would honestly consider to be an almost perfect character. Zack is just that bloody awesome, I love him. And now, here was the remake, giving me a what-if scenario where in an alternative universe out there somewhere, there's a version of my favourite character who survived. Zack Fair is out there somewhere, and he lived. I wasn't expecting Square to give us alternative realities in the remake series. This was actually the last thing I expected to see. But I welcomed it with open arms, because if there's something you want to know about me, it's the fact that I love the concept of alternative timelines. I love seeing how things could have been different had certain events swayed in a different angle. Movies like those featured in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that deal with time travel and alternative dimensions, or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse being a fantastic example of alternative realities. The Back to the Future series is a brilliant example of time travel and what happens during a what-if moment when something is changed. I love all of this what-if shit, but it's not something you can just throw around nonchalantly. For an alternative event to have impact, it needs to be of something that has held significance for a duration of time. Zack Fair's death has been canon for over 2 decades. It is common knowledge and everybody knows the weight his death carries. We have lived with this plot point for years, which is why, especially in my case, to see Zack Fair cheat death and survive now opens the floodgate of what that entails. In fact, a few years ago I was going to make a video on a what if Zack Fair survived concept, but I never got around to it. I just always wondered what would happen and how that would change things for the overall storyline. And well, holy shit, Square Enix read my mind, because now they're doing it in an official canonical capacity. Granted, it's in an alternative timeline, but regardless, just the fact that Zack is alive in another timeline somewhere now makes the mind wonder on why this has happened and what will happen in that timeline going forward. But I digress, I'm geeking out a bit here, sorry, back on focus. So, the ending and the controversy surrounding it. With Cloud and crew defeating Fate, with Sephiroth dealing with elements of time travel, and with Zack Fair surviving in an alternative timeline, I can absolutely understand why some fans are scared about the future of the remake series. When you start messing around with things like this, you run the risk of convoluting your storyline. You also need to be able to tie up all these wild, outrageous loose threads in a satisfactory way, and that's just for any general time travel alternative timeline story. The fact that we're introducing these elements into one of the most beloved video game storylines of all time, one that was already a complex story to begin with, is a very bold move, to say the least. I totally get you if you're feeling hesitant or even outright dislike this direction, because the unknown is now staring back at you and you don't know if you're going to like what you find in there. I'm in the same boat as you. Square Enix might botch the landing, all this extra effort to expand the storyline might fall flat on its ass, and the payoff won't be worth it. It is entirely possible that this might be the case. But can I just point out one thing? And it's the reason why I'm not angry. I haven't seen where this goes yet. The unknown is a flip of the coin. It can go either way. It can land with the correct side up and everything is amazing, or it can land badly and it's all gone to shit. We don't know what way it will land. We haven't reached that point in time yet, and if we haven't reached that point in time yet, I can't be angry at it. I know people have been burnt by Square's attempts at storytelling in the past, and I'm right there with you, I agree. There were times when I've been annoyed or upset at how something was handled, and it's not without reason that I might feel a little cautious as well. But angry? To feel hatred towards this direction. How could I be angry when Final Fantasy VII Remake has done such a good job at opening up the playing field and winning my respect? I mean, look at me. Look at us. We spent over 20 years analysing and talking about FF7's storyline to such an extent that there's not much else left to talk about. A 1-for-1 remake would have been nice, but if I'm being honest with myself, I feel it would have been too straight and narrow. No doubt I would have appreciated it, but I'd also know everything that was coming. Like this, Final Fantasy VII Remake's decision to broaden the horizon a little means I'm now no longer certain on what might happen. Now I can have discussions with others about what I think will happen for the future. To bring up the MCU again, one of the most successful film franchises of all time, each film left fans hanging on its every whim at the end of each movie. Why? Because in a way, the movies were remakes of their comic book counterparts. Remakes that followed the same beats, but did things in such a way that it allowed fans to discuss what they think might happen in the next movie, because the next movie wasn't out yet, so speculation would carry us to that next movie. A whole decade of films kept fans like me discussing what might happen next. The Final Fantasy VII Remake series is now offering us this chance to talk, to discuss, theorise and be part of an open forum of conversation. I get the chance to speculate on a game I love dearly, all from a fresh and invigorating angle. How could I not jump at that chance? But still, it's in the back of your mind, innit? They're going to mess it up, or they're going to change everything and it's going to suck. And as I said, these are possibilities, so we can't rule them out. But they're not set in stone. And it's in closing to this video do I want to address some of those concerns. As I said, I share the same fears, but I'm also giving the benefits of the doubt to Square based on what I've played in this remake and what I think the mentality at Square Enix seems to be like in regards to FF7 as a whole. I now understand why it took Square so long to make the remake. Final Fantasy VII is important. No, I'm not saying that as a die-hard fan, I'm saying that somewhat critically. For its time. Final Fantasy VII left such a lasting impression, I don't think Square themselves had expected to inflict such a dent on the video game industry with it. The legacy for FF7 is incredible, even if you hate the damn thing. You cannot deny its mark on history. Square's hesitance to make a remake is justified. Certain people needed to be involved. Certain leaps in computer game development needed to happen for FF7 Remake to be realised in this way. It was not a decision to be made lightly. If you want to remake something that is so beloved by the world over, you don't step outside your office with something you threw together in 5 minutes. You discuss and you plan and you organise and you build and you construct and you painstakingly take it upon yourself to do the best damn job you can do. For a game like this, for a game like Final Fantasy VII, you don't mess around. You got a tall order hanging over your arse and you know it. They know it. Square knows what's at stake, and they know how important this game is. If this remake series ends with a massive fan backlash, it could potentially ruin them once and for all. It might be a nail in the coffin on their image and credibility. The story and characters for FF7 are so beloved by both creators and fans that any slight change could spell devastation if handled incorrectly. It's on those grounds alone, on the basis that the legacy surrounding FF7 is so understood by the world over, that I will be giving the benefit of the doubt to Square to see this through to a satisfactory conclusion. You only need to look at the care and dedication that was placed into this first remake game to see how committed they are at doing this right. FF7 Remake is a celebration of FF7 Original. It is a love letter. Square are reaching out and asking for my respect. They want me to place my hopes into them, and I'm gonna do it. They have me curious, they have me excited, and they have me talking about my favourite game of all time in a new, completely different way. I can't be mad at that, even if I tried. I can be cautious like everyone else, but there's no way I can be upset about this. Too much potential has presented itself, and right now, at this very moment in time, before we are anywhere near the conclusion for the FF7 Remake series, it's open season and nothing is set in stone, and on those grounds, I am able to feel excited at what might happen next. If the series concludes and I don't like how it ends, then so be it. I will complain at how disappointed I am at that point in time, should it even come to pass in the first place. That's just one possible outcome from a list of possible what-if outcomes. But for this moment in time, a moment in time after the remake series has begun but before the series has concluded, I'm feeling joy, appreciation, and a level of eagerness for the future. I recognise this video is getting a little long, so, I'll wrap it up in a second. I still want to talk about what I think the future holds for the storyline, so maybe I will make another video highlighting my thoughts and speculations there, but for now, I just wanted to express my feelings on what the ending to Final Fantasy VII Remake did to me. I'm seeing it as something positive, and I will run with that feeling until something happens to change it. Thank you for watching this video. I know it was another long one. I think I talked too much in it. Man's got too much to say about this game. I love it. What can I say? I love Final Fantasy VII. I want to talk about it all day long. I'm going to talk about it. But much love to you all. I hope you're all staying safe out there right about now. Hopefully we'll get through this pandemic sooner rather than later. And until next time, I've been Niji Valentine. Thank you for your time. Take care. And hopefully I'll see you all again real soon.